Should a small child be allowed to pilot a plane? The U.S. government will take a sharp look at the rules. Those stories and all the news on this Thursday night, April 11th, 1996.
Live from KTVU, this is the award-winning 10 o'clock news on Channel 2, the #1 primetime newscast in the country.
Good evening, I'm Elaine Corral.
And I'm Dennis Richmond. 7-year-old Jessica DuBroff's hopes of becoming the youngest person to fly across country and back died with her this morning when her tiny Cessna crashed onto a street in Cheyenne, Wyoming. Jessica, her father, and her flight instructor impact. Investigators say it's too early to say what caused the crash or even to say who was at the controls. We begin our coverage with Randy Shandable in Cheyenne.
This is 7-year-old Jessica DuBroff running through the rain this morning at the Cheyenne, Wyoming airport with a cellular phone to her ear. She was telling her mother how thrilled and excited she was as she was about to take off on the next leg of her journey across America. Minutes later, her attempt to become the youngest person ever to pilot a plane across the nation and back ended. Jessica, her father Lloyd DuBroff, and Jessica's flight instructor Joe Reed all died after their single-engine Cessna crashed in a residential neighborhood just a half-mile beyond the end of the runway. Witnesses say it spiraled straight down like a dart.
It seemed like it was trying to land, and then it just lost something, fell off on one wing and went right in.
It was never gaining any altitude more of maybe 200 or 300 feet at the most. It continued to climb, but with the heavy rain, and the plane was clearly overloaded. And it was just never gaining any altitude. It made a big arc. It came across kind of over Buttrey's grocery store, and as I was turning into the parking lot to work, it literally just turned over and dropped. It went straight into the ground.
The Cheyenne police chief was one of the first on the scene. He believes whoever the pilot was, Jessica or her flight instructor, he believes that pilot died a hero trying to avoid homes.
I can tell you that the plane missed a house, and I don't know how it did, but I would like to think that maybe the last effort was to miss that house.
The airport manager says conditions were very bad this morning. Heavy rain, sleet, wind, and cold. Perhaps cold enough to cause dangerous icing. Conditions similar to these as we approach Cheyenne Airport after today's crash. Our experienced pilot said landing in such conditions made him nervous. The airport says decisions to fly in such weather are between the pilot and FAA flight controllers. Jessica, her father, and Joe Reed began their attempt at setting a record yesterday in Half Moon Bay, California, and landed here in Cheyenne last night for their first rest stop. Jessica, so short she sat on a booster seat and had special pedal extenders for her feet, was greeted like a star by people in Cheyenne yesterday evening.
We're glad to have you in Cheyenne. All right.
Today, many of those same people came to erect an impromptu memorial in the snow next to the wreckage. The memorial included a toy balsa wood plane, the kind of plane most 7-year-olds fly. In order to break the unofficial age record, no publications recognize such records, Jessica had to pilot the plane the entire journey. Her instructor was to sit next to her, but not touch the controls unless there was an emergency. The police chief told us the bodies were too to tell who was flying, but witnesses say Jessica was in the pilot's seat.
If you're a young person listening to this, I'd urge you to take on challenges. Make sure your parents, well, you'll take on some your parents won't approve of, and that's the way it goes. We all did. But challenge yourself and reach for a little more than you think you can do.
What do you think about when you're up in a plane?
Well, you got to think about not crashing or doing any mistakes like that.
Do you ever think about, does that scare you?
No.
You seem pretty fearless.
Yeah.
You keep looking at the plane. Are you concerned about it?
No.
What do you think about, your dad's a pretty special guy, isn't he?
Yeah.
Are you excited about your next leg of your trip?
Yeah.
What do you want to do throughout this whole thing? Do you want to break a record?
Yeah, I want to break the record.
Do you think you're going to do it?
Yeah.
Jessica's mother was waiting to meet her at the halfway point of her round-trip journey. Jessica's mother, her older brother, and younger sister caught a plane for Cheyenne tonight.
I talked to Jess, and Joe and Lloyd before the plane was started on the cellular phone. And Jess wanted to get going. She said, Mom, I hear rain. You hear the rain, Mom? You hear the rain? She's just as beautiful as she is, her free spirit. And she said, I want to go, Mom. I want to go. I want to start the engine. I said, okay. I said, have a great time. I love you, Jess. And then I talked to her father on the plane and said, I just talked to him for a long time. I don't know. Seemed like a long time. I told him how grateful I am that he was doing this with Jess and how wonderful this was.
The last couple of days, little Jessica has been so excited she could barely contain herself. Last night when she landed here in Cheyenne, she told people that she was tired from her long flight, but so happy and so looking forward to today's flight that she was afraid she couldn't sleep. In Cheyenne, Wyoming, Randy Shandeville for the 10 o'clock news.
After the deadly crash of 7-year-old Jessica DuBroff's plane, the federal government today immediately ordered a review of FAA rules on who can fly airplanes. The chairman of the House Aviation Subcommittee called the fatal flight today a needless tragedy. And the National Transportation Safety Board has begun its investigation into what caused the crash. For the latest on that, we go to Cheyenne, Wyoming, where Randy Shandeville is standing by with a live report. Randy.
Elaine, we're back at the crash site tonight. As you know, the wreckage was removed from here several hours ago, but the makeshift shrine that perhaps you can see behind me, that's been growing pretty much all night long, even though it is bitter cold here tonight. An hour and a half ago, Jessica's mother, brother, and sister, they arrived in town from Boston. Jessica's mother has come here to perform the grim task of claiming the body of her child. Also tonight, about 3 hours ago, the National Transportation Safety Board held a press conference near the crash site. Basically, they said it's way too early to determine the cause of today's crash. They said it could take up to 6 months.
Aircraft accident investigations are complex. They have a lot of different issues in them, and the things that we're going to be looking at will be power plants, airframes, aerodynamics, physiology, human performance, air traffic control, meteorology, and then other ancillary issues, fueling, weight and balance on the aircraft. There's quite a large number of issues that we'll be looking at.
In other words, at this point, it's really wide open as to what the official cause was, but unofficially, we've been talking to several pilots in the Cheyenne area, and they say it's almost certainly one of three things: the weather, obviously, the experience or lack of experience of the pilot, and the third possibility, the altitude here is 6,200 feet. That's significantly above a mile in altitude, and experienced pilots say it's much more difficult to take off at this altitude than it is at sea level, especially for an inexperienced pilot. One more thing, Jessica's father reportedly was carrying a home video camcorder on board the plane. If the NTSB is able to recover that camera, then perhaps we'll get some answers before 6 months are up. Elaine, Dennis, back to you.
Randy Shandeville live in Cheyenne. Thank you, Randy. The story of Jessica DuBroff's attempt at making history ended disastrously, but it all started out on a lighthearted note just yesterday morning. It was at the small airport along Highway 1 in Half Moon Bay where the fatal flight began. Today, that airport was a gathering place for people in shock. Rob Roth has this report.
The people who fly regularly in and out of Half Moon Bay's tiny airport form a small and closely knit community. This morning at this airport, where 7-year-old Jessica DuBroff learned to fly, the flags flew at half-staff. And pilots came here to the 30 Cafe, the only coffee shop at the airport. One pilot said he just didn't know where else to go. Just about all the pilots and airport workers knew Jessica. She'd been taking flying lessons here for months, and everyone loved having her around.
Jessica was here the other day having French fries, so you know, I guess probably I'll need some time to just think about it, you know.
She was a happy little kid. I mean, you know, you see her out here skipping around the apron. You know, and I've seen her fly. She handled the aircraft pretty well from where we could see.
Everyone, I think, was kind of rooting for her. It kind of brought the flying community together, I think. Everybody wishing her the best and such. I was out here nearly every day. I'm associated with the flying club, and yeah, it's just I don't know. She just meant a lot to us.
People here also lost a close friend, flight instructor Joe Reed, a regular at the airport and the owner of the plane that crashed. Reed was also a professional financial consultant.
You know, he's the president of the Pilot Association here. He's a member of the water board in town. He's a member of the Knights of Columbus. You know, some of the things, you know, he's...
Good guy.
Yeah, he's literally a pillar of the community. And we're just all taken back by it, you know.
Joe's, Mr. Half Moon Bay Airport.
Throughout the day, people came to the coffee shop with bouquets of flowers. A restaurant table became a makeshift memorial. Many of the people who brought flowers had never even met Jessica.
Okay, I just have a daughter, and it's something here in the area. I just want people to bring flowers. I did not know Jessica at all.
I used to sit out here, watch airplanes take off and land, and I've, you know, watched her practice. That's kind of tough.
Folks talked about the excitement here yesterday morning when Jessica took off in the Cessna to begin her trip. Minutes before, Jessica's father said the cross-country flight of an 11-year-old girl inspired this mission.
And it occurred to me a couple of months ago, Jess had been taking lessons for 2 or 3 months, that gosh, she could do that. She was coming along well enough. And I asked her if that's something she would like to do. I said I would sponsor it. I'd fund it if she wanted to. And she said, yes, she'd really like to do that.
Last Sunday, while Jessica was taking a flying lesson, she had this conversation with a reporter.
Why decide to do this sort of what many think would be a dangerous trip?
Well, I believe it was my dad's idea.
I think the main thing is she's going to meet a lot of new people who have think differently than we think here in California, have different value systems and sets, and look at the world differently, and I think that's going to really expand her horizons.
Yesterday morning at Half Moon Bay Airport, wearing a hat that says "Women Fly," 7-year-old Jessica saw her mother for what would be the final time.
Will you say bye to me on the radio after you're up? I will. Okay, I'll be being for it, Jess. Great flight.
She sat in the cockpit, started the engine. Waved goodbye, and they were off. Many of the pilots here are trying to figure out what could have gone so wrong in Wyoming. But mostly folks here are in mourning for their 3 friends. At Half Moon Bay Airport, Rob Roth for the 10 o'clock news.
Residents of the San Mateo County town of Pescadero were stunned this morning upon learning that Jessica DuBroff had been killed in that plane crash. Jessica lived in Pescadero. For many there, it will take some time to get over the shock. Diane Garazzi has that report.
The flag in Pescadero Town Square flew at half-staff today with flowers below as a loving tribute to Jessica DuBroff. News of her death this morning shook townspeople hard.
Started crying. I was just coming here to get my coffee and heard it on the radio. But I don't know. I'm just kind of at a loss right now.
Jessica's friends were still wearing hats today that she'd given them before taking off on her fateful cross-country flight.
I just couldn't believe that this could possibly happen. Haven't found the part of it yet, I don't think.
Neighbors say Jessica was a sprightly 7-year-old who expressed an interest in flying about a year ago. She lived in Pescadero a little more than a year with her mother, brother, and sister. For schooling, the children stayed at home, taught by their mother in this pastoral setting. Pescadero is a close-knit farming community of only about 2,000 people. Jessica became an instant celebrity here when she announced that she would fly across the country. Her friends were very proud of her.
She said flying is very fun, and she liked to fly very much.
She also liked to ride horses at this ranch every day, where today the staff was suffering.
I mean, that's probably the worst thing, is to see people that loved her who miss her. That's for me, is like the worst part of it, because you want to be helpful and be a comfort to people, but you can only do so much.
At the ranch, in the days leading up to the flight, Jessica talked excitedly about her adventure.
The last thing I said to her, I said, "Are you scared?" And she said, no, I don't think anyone ever really thought of it kind of that way.
I asked Jess a couple of days ago if she'd flown in the rain, and she said, oh yeah, fog, oh yeah, the wind, oh yeah. And we talked about the difficulties of some of those things, and she recognized them and had experienced them.
Looking back on the brief life of Jessica DuBroff, what townspeople remember most are her spirit and generosity. The postmaster said she would come here to the post office 2 or 3 times a week to send money she earned cleaning stables to a poor child in South America.
She was great. She was a bright star, very always a smile on her face, always very polite, and she'll be missed in Pescadero.
Missed, but not forgotten. In Pescadero, Diane Garazzi for the 10 o'clock news.
Well, there is the human side to this story, but there is also the aviation side. Coming up here, pilots talk about the difficulties Jessica may have encountered this morning.
And we'll tell you how her death may change the laws governing who can legally fly a plane. Dennis and I will be right back. An eyewitness to the small plane crash in Wyoming this morning said Jessica DuBroff's plane didn't climb the way it should have, that it never climbed above 400 feet. Did the difference in altitude at the Cheyenne airport play a part in the crash? For a look at that question and at a phone call that was never made last night, Leslie Griffith is at the Oakland airport with a live report. Leslie.
Elaine, Jessica was used to taking off from an airport much like Oakland's, close to sea level. Cheyenne, Wyoming's airport is at 6,000 feet. Many pilots say that alone could have caused some problems.
The aircraft has a certain performance. At 6,000 feet, it has less performance. It's like driving a car that might need a tune-up, or it might be a little sluggish, like going up a mountain, flat ground, and all of a sudden you hit a hill and your car becomes sluggish.
At higher elevations, an aircraft is not as responsive, according to Putnam. He says the plane had just refueled and was heavier. The high altitude and full tanks could have kept the plane from climbing as fast as Jessica was used to. Not to mention a thunderstorm with 15-mile-per-hour winds and gusts up to 32 miles per hour.
It was raining when she got to the plane, when she was doing her pre-check this morning, checking the oil and checking the water just before taking off. I mean, I've talked to a number of pilots today. I mean, I'm sure, I know you have, and they'll all say that they wouldn't have taken off in that weather. And that's about as simply as you can state it.
It has been a difficult day for Mike Peckner. He was consulting the DuBroffs on weather conditions during their trip. He spoke with them Tuesday, but says they never called last night. Peckner said a relative did call and said the first leg of the trip was more grueling than expected.
They had headwinds coming into Cheyenne yesterday because of this developing weather system. And their ground speed dropped to about 90 miles an hour. The plane can do about 140, 150. And this made them late. And it's a long day. Plus, you lose an hour by going west. I mean, they've been in the air for, I don't know, more than 12 hours, 14 hours. So they went right to the, they went right to the hotel room. And went to Real simple, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And then this morning I was up at 5 o'clock, no phone call.
Peckner says he believes the DuBroffs were trying to beat a major storm that was moving into Wyoming and could very well have impeded their progress for days if they didn't try to get ahead of it. He says if only they would have called.
It's like somebody shoved me off the cliff. I mean, and I'm not saying that I could have convinced them not to go, but I'd like to have had that opportunity. I mean, it's that simple.
Peckner says the DuBroffs worried about delays because Jessica's 8th birthday was next month and they hoped to set the record when she was 7. Also, Peckner says he told Mr. DuBroff that his daughter's story might interest the media, that it seemed to him Mr. DuBroff had not intended to get the media involved at all. A final note, an aviation lawyer and pilot who used to own a Cessna 177B told reporters today that the plane is, quote, underpowered, and he described it, and this is a quote now, as a lead sled. Dennis and Elaine.
Leslie Griffith live in Oakland. Thank you, Leslie.
In Washington, D.C. today, Tennessee Republican John Duncan said he thinks it's a crime that a 7-year-old was allowed to pilot a plane. Duncan is chairman of the House Aviation Subcommittee. He said he will introduce a bill next week to prohibit children from flying airplanes. There are no such prohibitions right now, as consumer editor Tom Vakar reports.
The rules about who can fly a plane are simple. Some say too simple. No one can get a pilot's license and fly a powered plane alone until the age of 16. No one can haul a passenger in powered flight until the age of 17. Glider and hot air balloon pilots, though, can be legally licensed at age 14. But anyone, any age, can take lessons and actually fly so long as there's a licensed pilot on board who says it's permissible.
The ability of a non-pilot of any age to manipulate the controls is a judgment of the pilot in command at any time. Non-pilots, whether they are, in this case, 7 years old or 97 years old, manipulate the controls only when it is safe to do so.
7-year-old Jessica DuBroff was just one of many young children learning to fly. According to the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, most students start taking flying lessons in their mid-teens. But in recent years, the age of people trying to set records has decreased. Jessica DuBroff, at age 7, was trying to break the Guinness Book of World Records youngest cross-country pilot record set in 1994 by an 8-year-old, Killian Moss of Phoenix. Rachel Carter of Ramona was 9 when she flew cross-country last year. Back in 1991, Daniel Shanklin of San Antonio, also age 8, held the previous record. Ironically, the Guinness Book no longer recognizes the youngest pilot record because of the danger of mishaps such as today's. But the FAA does not blame Jessica, who was legally only a passenger.
The pilot in command, in this case, the flight instructor, Mr. Reed, be responsible for the control and safe flight of the aircraft.
The FAA says it will review whether non-pilots of any age should be allowed to control a. Some people are already calling for an end to flights with children under age 13 or 14 at the controls. Hayward pilot and flight instructor Jim Larson owns his own helicopter, airplane, and flight training center at Hayward. Larson says he taught his son, now a corporate pilot, to fly much earlier than Jessica DuBroff started.
When he was 2, 3, 4, 5, right, 7, the age, he was flying an airplane. He sat beside me, he learned to fly. It was either he flew or he slept. I've seen a lot of children that are naturals that can fly better than a person in his 30s, 40s, or 50s.
Children have dreamed of flying pretty much since airplanes have been around. And many of those children did learn how to fly long before they were ever old enough to drive a car. Today's accident may lead to changes in all of that, but flight instructors tell me that would be a knee-jerk reaction, denying those children the right to live out their dreams. In Hayward, I'm consumer editor Tom Vakar for the 10 o'clock news.
There is other news to report on this Thursday night. Still ahead, the federal government picks its team to prosecute Unabomb suspect Ted Kaczynski, and the team has a Bay Area connection. The U.S. beefs up its military presence in Western Africa as the threat of violence against Americans heightens.
A bit later in tonight's newscast, San Francisco officials point the finger of blame for the collapse of this house last year. Elaine and I will be right back. Was 7-year-old Jessica DuBroff's single-engine plane in trouble even before she attempted to take off? Jessica's family visited the Wyoming crash site today, and her brother explained what was said on a cell phone moments before the crash. Agents searching Theodore Kaczynski's tiny cabin have reportedly made their most important find yet. And what began as an outing on Tomales Bay somehow turned into a deadly boating accident. Those stories, all the news on this Friday night, April 12th, 1996.
Live from KTVU, this is the award-winning 10 o'clock news on Channel 2, the #1 primetime newscast in the country.
Good evening, I'm Dennis Richmond. Elaine Corral is off tonight. The National Transportation Safety Board today began the painstaking task of trying to determine what caused the fatal crash of the single-engine plane carrying 7-year-old Jessica DuBroff. Already, investigators say one thing is certain. The tiny Cessna was badly overloaded when it tried to take off in a rainstorm yesterday. Diane Dwyer is in San Mateo County with a live report for us. Diane?
Dennis, the flag at the Half Moon Bay Airport is at half-staff tonight in memory of Jessica DuBroff, her father, Lloyd, and flight instructor Joe Reed. People came by the airport all day and evening. They left flowers, poems, and teddy bears at a makeshift memorial. About 1,000 miles away in Cheyenne, Wyoming, where the 3 died yesterday, National Transportation Safety Board officials announced that their investigation turned up a serious problem with the flight.
The total weight of the occupants and the aircraft and the items inside the aircraft and assuming full fuel puts the aircraft well over maximum gross takeoff weight.
The 2,500-pound limit for the Cessna 177B includes the weight of the plane, fuel, passengers, and personal belongings such as baggage. Officials say the excess weight resulted in part from numerous personal belongings. And Jessica's father, Lloyd, even made reference to that before leaving Cheyenne yesterday.
Well, first of all, Jess's mom loaded us up with 200 pounds of groceries.
National transportation safety officials, though, say they still do not know what exactly caused the plane to crash just after takeoff. They say it could be a number of things: the weather, the altitude. Cheyenne Airport is 6,000 feet above sea level, the structural integrity of the aircraft, and/or the experience of the people flying the plane. What they do know is that the plane had difficulty from the moment it took off.
So the aircraft is using essentially about half of the runway to take off, becoming airborne and climbing out very slowly, very gradually. And the estimated altitude, maximum altitude, is about 300 to 400 feet above ground level before the aircraft is observed in a very rapid roll-off and a steep descent to ground impact.
At the Half Moon Bay Airport, where the flight began, people couldn't help but discuss the fatal flight and wonder what went wrong. Instructor Joe Reed taught here for 4 years. His friends say they can't believe he would knowingly allow the single-engine Cessna to be overloaded.
It's uncharacteristic of Joe Reed. He was too careful of a pilot to allow that to have happened. And he's flown that airplane, Lordy, all over the place, from here to Oshkosh to all over the United States. And, you know, with people aboard, his wife and family, and they never had that before. Why would we have it now?
Storrs is the only other flight instructor at the Half Moon Bay Airport. He says he wants to know more about the investigation. He says there's much more than just the weight of the plane to consider.
We call it a weight and balance check. Make sure you're within the maximum gross weight of the airplane and where you've got your people located.
Storrs added that the 7-year-old, in his opinion, was capable of flying the plane on the most basic level under normal conditions. He said she probably did not understand the instruments and control panels, but that's why the instructor is there. He had his own controls and could take over at any time. The National Transportation Safety Board says it could take as long as 6 months to determine why the Cessna crashed. Dennis.
Diane Dwyer in San Mateo County, thank you. Jessica's surviving family members, mother, brother, and sister, visited the crash site in Wyoming today. A makeshift shrine has been created, and total strangers are being to express their grief. Randy Shannable was in Cheyenne today. He filed this report.
The people of Cheyenne, Wyoming, everyone we talked to today seemed to be in a state of mourning, almost as if the 7-year-old girl who died here yesterday was their own child.
It just touched everybody here. I mean, you know, and then I have grandchildren about her age, and, you know, and like they say, you know, hug your child.
3 people died in the Cheyenne crash yesterday: Jessica DuBroff, her father Lloyd, and her flight instructor Joe Reed. But clearly, Jessica, the little California girl who wanted to become the youngest person ever to pilot a plane cross-country, is the one Cheyenne grieves for, the one they left this memorial for at the crash site. These 2 women told us they're lucky to be alive today. Theirs is the house the plane just missed on its plummet to Earth. The women, Jessica, steered the plane away in the final seconds.
She didn't even have a life, poor little girl. Maybe God will help her.
As a nonstop stream of cars slowly filed by, Jessica's surviving family came to see the accident site, came to see the impromptu memorial the people of Cheyenne created.
May I hold you, Jasmine? Can I pick you up?
Just as the story of Jessica's attempt for a record became a public spectacle, so has her family's mourning process. In a crush of cameras, Mother Lisa Blair Hathaway tried to explain to 9-year-old Joshua and 3-year-old Jasmine how their sister died, how their father died.
You clear that their plane went down? Then they crashed? And they're not alive anymore?
During yesterday's snowstorm here, someone left a toy balsa wood plane as a memorial to Jessica. Today, Jasmine found it. Mother talked about Jessica's last phoned words to her just before takeoff yesterday. Jasmine told her she could fly too.
My sister, if we can find her, will come. I know, Jess. She said, "Did you hear the rain, Mom? Mom, do you hear the rain?"
Despite his sister's death, Joshua said he still wants to be a child pilot. He told us he talked by phone to his father after the plane took off, less than a minute before it crashed.
When I talked to them, they're just leaving the end of the runway. They were just turning crosswind, and he said the plane's moving around a lot. It's really windy.
How bad was the weather in Cheyenne yesterday morning? Bad enough that a major commercial airlines delayed one of its flights that was scheduled to take off at almost the exact same time Jessica's plane took off. Airline officials say they delayed it because of the dangerous.
The 8:30 United Express flight to Denver was delayed for an hour. The 19-seat Beechcraft sat on the ground while Jessica's tiny Cessna took off. Still, Jessica's mother defended the flight, said she would fight any FAA talk of banning children from flying. She said Jessica died the way she wanted to die, flying with her father, dying with her father Lloyd's protective arms around her.
Joe was ejected from the plane with a seatbelt on, and Lloyd was in back, behind Jess, laying on his side with his arm reached around to her. So I know he was holding her when they went down. I know his arm was around her. I know Lloyd, he put himself in front of her in any way he could.
Tomorrow, Lisa Blair Hathaway hopes to accompany the bodies of Jessica, her ex-husband, and of her friend Joe Reed home to Northern California. Today, she knelt above the darkened patch in the street where their plane crashed and said, in Cheyenne, Wyoming, Randy Shandabell for the 10 o'clock news.
Jessica DuBroff was clearly excited about her trip, and members of the news media have reported many times that it was her dream. But since the crash, some people are now asking, whose dream was it really? John Fowler reports tonight on the pressure that can come to bear on a child in such a situation and on adults as well.
It's eerie to look back now. Jessica DuBroff, only barely able to see over the glare shield of the ill-fated Cessna Cardinal, told us Sunday as she prepared for the flight that the idea was really her father's, and he asked her mom.
He said, "Can Jess fly cross country when she's 8 and go see her grandpa?"
Child behavior experts say Jessica's enthusiasm may have been drawn from a natural and healthy desire to please her father, and that Lloyd DuBroff felt his daughter was so special this flight, under a deadline, was worth the risk.
When parents feel that their child is special, it can lead to some misjudgments about what's best for them.
There was national media attention, though Jessica's family reportedly did not seek it and may have tried this even without the hoopla.
I didn't think anybody'd be interested, really. This started off as a father-daughter adventure. It's gotten wonderfully out of hand. We didn't go into this thinking book deal or movie deal or any of that nonsense.
But somewhere along the way, experts say, the heady magic of soaring through the sky may have mixed with the earthly intoxication of fame. When ABC TV donated a cockpit video camera, when photographers and reporters asked for pictures and quotes, when crowds met her in Wyoming, all that undoubtedly reinforced the perceived importance of completing this flight.
Media attention can really swing the judgmental processes of a parent, of kids, of a family.
Possibly of the pilot in command, flight instructor Joe Reed, responsible for deciding to take off in freezing rain in a marginally capable and reportedly overloaded airplane. All to let Jessica claim she's the youngest cross-country flyer, not even a recognized record. The influential Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association charges that this flight was irresponsible.
I think the irresponsibility is the stunt nature of the flight.
Members of Congress want FAA rules changed, and pilots expect action soon.
I suspect now that you will see a change, and there will be a floor at the youngest age that you can begin taking lessons.
Pilots argue strongly against restricting the age of someone wanting to learn to fly. But lawmakers are also considering controlling the age of pilots in so-called publicity flights. That will likely generate much less opposition. I'm John Fowler for the 10 o'clock news.
The bodies of all 3 crash victims are expected to arrive home Francisco Bay Area tomorrow afternoon. United Airlines has offered transportation at no charge. Funeral arrangements for Jessica and her father are still pending. The funeral of flight instructor Joe Reed will be Monday morning. He'll be remembered at a vigil at Our Lady of the Pillar Church in Half Moon Bay Sunday evening. Straight ahead tonight, new reports indicate authorities have found seemingly irrefutable evidence linking Ted Kaczynski to the Unabomb crimes. We'll also take you to the Marin County coast, where 4 people drowned today in treacherous waters. 11 years after the fact, subway gunman Bernard Getz speaks out in court. You'll hear what he said a bit later in this newscast. Plus, opening day at the Stick. All the hoopla, all the excitement.